We're looking at probably the single most difficult parable that Jesus told, difficult in terms of interpreting it. I'm going to take one track. I'm not going to confuse you by, I've seen a couple lectures on this parable where they give you 7 options on how you want to see it. I'm going to take one track, and hopefully you'll agree with me. If not, as I like to say, only one of us is right, so we'll go with that. So it has various titles: the dishonest steward, the unjust steward. I titled it the Rascal, because when you hear it, the story, you just want to say, "You rascal," kind of thing. And that's not mine originally. There are others who have used the word rascally steward for a title as well. So we'll read it through together in just a little bit. Let's do our introduction to all of these parables. We're looking at, as you can see, Jesus walking with his disciples. We're looking at a conversational story along the way. So this story appears in the travel narrative of Luke, in the middle chapters of Luke, that span from chapter 9 all the way to the edge of Jerusalem as Jesus is about ready to enter on Palm Sunday into the city of Jerusalem. Those in-between chapters are rich with conversational stories. That is, stories that were told by Jesus along the way of his travel, probably traveling between Galilee and Jerusalem. So through Samaria, but at times probably went back into Galilee, probably, I think, entered Jerusalem a couple times before the actual entry on Palm Sunday. But stories along the way that are conversational. So in this is where the idea came to me. We get this wonderful concept of conversational stories for witness. That just as Jesus could tell stories in an informal way, he was not, I can't say this really, he wasn't a theologian-like storyteller. He didn't use theological abstracts. I don't know if he ever used, I'm pretty sure he never used the word predestination, for instance, or eschatology. Those big nouns are what systematic theologians love to use. And we have a whole school of systematic theology at seminaries, so we know about that. When he taught theology, he told stories. And so it seems to me that we can learn from this that as we probe the stories of Jesus, we might also try to connect with that story of Jesus with our own story that somehow parallels it in some way and use that in witness to others. So our witness may be most effective when our story connects with Jesus' story and with the story of the person with whom we're witnessing. And so his story is open-ended. That is, there's always more to get from his stories. We could do a second lecture on this same parable. We won't. But it might be completely new and fresh because there's so much in each of his stories. So that the lines are open on that. But I'm talking about my story. I try to think of a story that's similar to this one. When was it that I ended up not being the best of stewards, but somehow got clever enough to work my way through? You might begin thinking about that. You rascal, you. That's what this story is about. And then how does that connect with someone that maybe at this time is struggling with stewarding the gifts that they have, stewarding the money they have, and perhaps stewarding something that belongs to someone else, which is really what a steward does. All right, so with that, let's take a look at the text from Luke 16. And Jesus said to the disciples, so that gives us the audience. This is right after Luke 15. It's a brilliant statement there, right? I wanted to say this is right after the prodigal son story in Luke 15. So that was told with which audience in mind? Scribes and Pharisees, that older brother, remember? The older brother and who couldn't rejoice in his younger brother's homecoming. That was told for the benefit of the scribes and Pharisees. But this is clearly told to the disciples. He also said to the disciples. So I don't want you to think that these are two separate audiences necessarily. I think he was being followed around by scribes and Pharisees, and his disciples were always at his side. Almost always, except when he took off to be alone. So that's how you end up with this. There was a rich man who had a manager, a steward. We'll talk about that word in just a second. And charges were brought to him that this man was wasting. We've seen that word before, wasting. Where? Prodigal son story. We're going to make some comparisons between this story and the prodigal son story. Wasting his possessions. And he called him and said to him, what is that I hear about you? Turn in the account of your management, for you can no longer be manager. Now, it appears to me that he's ready to fire him, but perhaps has not fired him yet. He's going to take a look at the ledger. So he's asking to show me the accounting, because I'm hearing bad things about you. I'm hearing that you're wasting what belongs to me. And the manager said to himself, this is one of those said to himself thing. We get these soliloquies quite a bit, don't we? We had it again in the prodigal son story. Said to himself, what shall I do since my master's taking the management away from me? I love this. I'm not strong enough to dig. He's a weakling, and I'm ashamed to beg. So digging and begging were his two options, and neither one appeals to him very much. I've decided what to do so that when I am removed from management, people may receive me into their houses. This is where the shrewdness, the cleverness comes in, all right? So summoning his master's debtors one by one, he did this on a one-by-one basis, he said to the first, how much do you owe my master? He said 100 measures of oil. He said, then take your bill, sit down quickly because we got to get this done because the master's going to fire me. So while I still have his authority, get this done, down quickly and write 50. Wow, 50% reduction. Then he said to another, and how much do you owe? He said 100 measures of wheat. He said to him, take your bill and write 80, 20% reduction. The master commended the dishonest manager for his shrewdness. For the sons of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than the sons of light. And I tell you, make friends for yourselves by means of unrighteous wealth. That should bother you a little bit. Make friends for yourselves by means of unrighteous wealth, so that when it fails, they may receive you into the eternal dwellings. Therein is the difficulty. We'll come back to verse 9. And then this is followed up by actually, when you look at it in the original and study the sentence forms, this is really a set of poetry lines with couplets. You can almost see the way the sentences are structured, that there's a first line and then a second line. I could have written it out that way, but I didn't because the translations don't. But this could be Jesus speaking right at the moment, giving another explanation. We just got in verse 9 an explanation, but in this case it could be Jesus following up his parable with even more explanation, or it could be these are things that Jesus said, these are bona fide Jesus sayings, but Luke puts them here because they fit the parable really well. So I can't tell you which is which, but I can tell you this, I believe with all my heart that Jesus said this. These are his words. That's why they're in red. One who is faithful in a very little is also faithful in much. Don't these sound like Proverbs? And one who is dishonest in a very little is also dishonest in much. Put that on a plaque and on your fridge. If then you have not been faithful in the unrighteous wealth, who will entrust to you the true riches? Oh, unrighteous wealth. But there's some true wealth as well. And if you've not been faithful in that which is another's, who will give you that which is your own? No servant can serve two masters. Oh, we've heard that. For either you will hate the one and love the other, or you'll be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. Remember what that Aramaic and his Greek roots too word is? Mammon. Very good. If you grew up with the King James Version, you remember the word mammon. And that's it's always written with a capital M, isn't it? It's mammon personified. Mammon as if it were a person. You can't serve God and mammon at the same time. All right, so that's the text. Let's put it in some context. The word that is translated steward or manager is oikonomos. Oikos in Greek means household, and nomos means rule. This is one who rules the household. Not the owner of the household, not the head of the household, but one who takes care of the household for the one who owns it. So that's oikonomos. So this is a parable that has to do with stewarding, managing. So, for instance, there are other parables of stewards. You can think of those. There are the wicked stewards that the owner sends a slave to them and they beat up the slave. The owner sends a son to them and they kill the son. That represents Jesus. So wicked stewards of the vineyard. There's also the parable of the talents in Matthew 25. Remember the different talent is a currency. And one gets, 150 and then one. And the others produce a lot of additional money, but that one talent guy buries the talent because he's afraid of not making money and being punished. All right, so we run into these steward parables, but the stewardship concept goes all the way back in terms of taking care of what belongs to someone else. The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. The earth belongs to the Lord. At creation in Genesis 2:15, we're told to work the earth and what else? Work it and subdue it and keep it, preserve it, take care of it. So we don't just work the earth. We find a balance in working the earth, subduing it, but also keeping it, saving it, preserving it. And therein lies the balance in the continuing debate on ecology and taking care of the earth. Yes, we want to use the earth's resources to the fullest, to the benefit of all, but at the same time, we want to make sure that we preserve the earth for future generations, and we just take good care of the earth because it doesn't belong to us. So the whole concept of stewarding has deep roots in biblical theology. The other thing that I'd say about the oikonomos word is that the whole concept of stewarding is one that belongs especially to those of us who are keepers of the faith, that the need to steward the faith, to take good care of theology, so that we hand it over to the next generation in all of its truth. And there's a whole lot more that goes on with that phrase oikonomos, and that I think is very important. But think household, and I wanted to share too that the culture at this time, and this is Kenneth Bailey again, the culture at this time was an agrarian culture, and it was a household agrarian culture, so that the culture was centered in family, living on a farm and raising produce. And they were self-sustaining usually, but the bigger farms actually made a profit by selling the produce. But it was a household culture. I like that, and I think the United States has been built on that same principle, but I worry about, are we losing family as the basis for the culture? In my family, I mean, excuse me, but not nuclear family. A mom, a dad, and kids, and they're living together in the same house, and they're taking good care of each other, and they're working to move forward in their life together. I think we're seeing less and less of the family, the household, as the bulwark, the foundation of our society, our culture. And that's sad and it's worrisome to me, and probably to you as well. All right. Then let's comment on your handout too on Luke's Gospel of Wealth and Finances. This is the gospel of the four that stands out because it mentions finances so much. And it could be, just guessing here, that it's because of who it was originally written for, and that was a guy named Theophilus. If you look at the first verses of the Gospel of Luke, and then the second volume, the first verses of the book of Acts, both are addressed to Theophilus, Your Excellency Theophilus. So that's a title that is usually reserved for the very wealthy. We don't know who Theophilus was. I think he was a church patriarch in Antioch. We know that there was a Theophilus named, there was a patriarch, a leader of the church in Antioch of Syria at the time of Jesus already. So that could be, but he could have just been a Roman official who was held in high esteem. But he's writing, Luke is probably fairly wealthy himself. Why? He's a physician. And he's writing to a wealthy person, and so that could explain why you're always talking about money in your gospel. Why is Jesus talking about money? So I gave you a list of all the different references. I don't think I'll go through it in detail, but again, you can see the reference even with John the Baptist the need for tax collectors to stop cheating in their IRS work and so forth. Jesus talks about generosity. Jesus' wealthy patrons, the women are said to follow along with the group of disciples, and they are those who support. They're the patrons of his ministry. The Good Samaritan uses his wealth to help the wounded person. The greed of a wealthy barn builder, we looked at that parable together. The extravagant grace of a prodigal's father. This parable, the rich man and Lazarus, which we won't look at. We just don't have time to look at that one. I wish we could have. That would have been a good one to look at. Wealthy patrons at Jesus' death and resurrection. So we're introduced to them at the beginning, and then they're there at the end of Jesus' earthly ministry as well. The other word that, besides the oikonomos word, which is an important word, that I'd like you to at least get a little acquainted with is the word that's used here for shrewdness or shrewd, phronimos. The manager acts shrewdly. And that's a very, very important word that's used, and it's the word phronesis in Aristotle's Ethics. And Aristotle definitely still had an influence on this culture at Jesus' time. Phronesis has to do with knowing what is the best practice at a given moment. All right, so Aristotle, and this was one of the virtues, when Aristotle listed his virtues, he listed phronesis. It's often just translated practical wisdom. It's just, this is somebody who knows what to do in the moment and knows that if I do this, there's probably going to be a bad outcome. If I do this, this is the way to go. This is the better outcome. That's phronesis. Aristotle had different words for knowledge. The one word was episteme, which was scientific knowledge. And the other word was techne. That's a word that we get technology from. Techne had to do with artistic knowledge. So this word is the shrewdness of knowing the right action to take in the right moment. Today, I'm just involved in a research project for a nonprofit organization where we're contacting 15 different nonprofits, charitable organizations, and asking them to tell us what are your best practices that sustain your organization. That's a phronesis question. Best practices. What are the best things you do to get this accomplished, to sustain your organization, to keep your organization going? That's a phronesis question. So best practices is something we're familiar with, and I think that's what phronesis is all about. So when the manager is called shrewd, it means he has this practical wisdom that just seems to know what action to take, even though he has to talk with himself a little while before he gets there. All right. I don't know why, but what came to mind was a book that I used to read to kids. I have to remember the exact name of it. Alexander Used to Be Rich Last Sunday. Anybody ever read that book? This is by Judith Viorst, the same author of Alexander's Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day. Same author, but it came after that. Judith Viorst also wrote Turning 40 and Other Atrocities. She's a wonderful writer. But Alexander, who used to be rich last Sunday, tells a story of another little guy, the same Alexander, only he's given a dollar bill by his grandma and grandpa, and he's going to try to make the most of that dollar bill, but he basically wastes it throughout the week, and you watch him waste it. He spends it on gum, he tastes the gum, then it loses its flavor, he wants more gum, so he buys more gum, that kind of thing. He goes to a garage sale, buys a bear without an eye, a deck of cards, it's missing 2 cards, so it's pretty useless. A candle that's got just a little bit of wick left, but these things appeal to him, so he buys them. He gets fined a dime for using bad language against his brothers. Nicholas tells him that he should spend his money and get a new face because he's ugly. And Alexander says Nicholas stinks. This is just classic Judith Viors. So he finally has nothing left, and then the last third of the story is trying to put Phronesis to work. How can I get more money? And he actually works really hard at pulling his teeth out, hoping he can put the teeth under a pillow and get a quarter, because that would be quite a return for just one tooth, he figures. And it goes on and on like this, and he's left penniless at the end of but it's a story of a little steward trying to be a good steward, but not faring very well, and wasting a lot of his money. It's a great story for kids if you want to teach some stewardship. It's still available. I checked on Amazon. It's still out there. 1987. That's how old I am. That book. That's not how old I am, but yeah. All right. So let's take a look at then the immediate context. The stated audience, as we said, is the disciples. He also said to his disciples. He also said. So this continues. Probably, at least these are Luke's words, but I think we should trust Luke, that this is said in addition to the prodigal son story in the same setting, only with a different target, being the disciples. I gave you the similarities between this story and the prodigal son story. Both the son and the manager betray a trust. The son, the inheritance that was given him, the manager, the goods that he's to oversee and the books he's to oversee. The same Greek word is used for wasted or squandered, diascorpidzo. Both son and manager depend on the mercy of a superior. If they're going to go anywhere in the story, it will be because either the father or the landowner, in the case of this story, is going to be there. And both give us self-talk planning, where we hear them talk to themselves and try to come up with a decision. Neither son nor manager offer excuses. You never hear the prodigal son say, well, I just had this urge. I can't help myself sometimes. I've got some kind of a mental issue, emotional issue. No excuses. And no excuses offered by this rascally manager as well. And both stories, like too many of Jesus, I'm going to criticize Jesus. Like so many of Jesus' stories, will tell us what happened. We're kind of leaving us hanging here. Did the older son go in or didn't he? Did he join the party or did he stand outside like a jerk? And what about this story? What happens with this? Does it turn out the way we think it turns out? Does the manager stay on because he's kind of hoodwinked his boss into not being able to fire him now because he's won the support of these new friends of his? We don't get the story's end. So again, lots of similarities. I've already mentioned this is one of the most difficult stories to interpret. There are some that kind of go way off on some different interpretations. We might talk about one or two of those, although I'm always leery to begin introducing new interpretations. So let's go verse by verse as we do each week and talk about each verse as it unfolds the story for us. So he also said to the disciples, verse 1, there was a rich man who had a manager, and charges were brought to him, that is, to the rich man, that this manager was wasting, there's that word, wasting, same word used as the prodigal son, his possessions. So I think we need to assume here a reputable, good landowner. All right, so this is not an evil landowner. There are some interpreters of this story that say, well, this whole story basically is taking us to hell, and the landowner is evil. And no, I think this landowner is a good landowner. He sees the injustice being done, the dishonesty of his steward, and calls him in. The steward, however, is unjust. He's a rascal. He's somebody that's trying to get away with wasting his master's money, probably on himself. He's probably embezzling money to his own gain. So that's the dishonest steward. The landowner, we should see as a landowner, a real estate guy who leases land to renters, and the way they pay him is in kind. So that when the harvest comes, he gets a percentage of, and that's clear from the story, he gets a percentage of the harvest that comes forward. All right, so the landowner is then a leaser of the property, and he gets a portion of it. We should assume everybody's wealthy. It's kind of like Edina, right? Yeah. Everybody's wealthy in this story. It looks like the people who are working the land are doing very, very well, the renters. And it looks like clearly the steward is doing well, and the landowner is doing well as well. So lots of wealth tied to this story. All right. And the charge is that the manager, again, is wasting his boss's wealth. It's about waste. Could have used another word. I think it's embezzlement for the sake of his own enjoyment. All right. Second verse. And he called him and said to him, that is, the landowner called the steward, said to him, "What is this that I hear about you? Turn in the account of your management, for you can no longer be manager." So the landowner decides then to terminate his manager. I think we'd have to say it's likely that he doesn't actually fire him yet, that there's a process probably by which he'll be terminated, because that allows the manager to have some time to work out his plan. So the manager is to turn in his accounting ledgers. I want to see the ledgers. I want to see what's going on. I've heard that you're wasting my wealth. And you need to note, I think, at least the way I'm interpreting this story, that when you listen to this from the landowner, there's a grace to what he says. There's no anger. There's no retribution. There's no legal action. So if I'm that rascally steward, I'm kind of pleased. I might lose my job, but he's not taking it any further. He hasn't even said that you need to pay me back what you've wasted. So there's a lot of grace in the landowner, and my interpretation of this parable, not strictly mine, along with others, depends on that grace aspect of the landowner. I cannot accept that landowner is an evil landowner. All right, and the manager said to himself, the steward said to himself, "What shall I do? Since my master is taking the management away from me, I'm not strong enough to dig, and I'm ashamed to beg." So he weighs his future. He's too weak for manual labor and too proud to beg charity. What will he do? This is one of those great moves by Jesus in storytelling that we don't know. We can't wait till you tell us. All right? So verse 4. I've decided what to do so that when I'm removed from management, I'm going to lose my job. Notice he said, when I am removed, he's not been removed yet, people may receive me into their houses. So he already knew these people. He worked with them, but now he's going to do something that will make them friends. They're not going to just be people that he's working with as a steward or a manager. He wants them to become friends. Why? He's going to need a place to live. He's going to need a place to have friends and a group to call his own. And perhaps this is the group that will do that. So the manager's plan will ensure an ongoing relationship with the renters. To secure his future, he's going to win them as his friends. The plan could also corner his boss into keeping him on the job. Now, we have to see what the plan is, but the benefit is going to also be to the boss as this plays out. So, summoning his master's debtors one by one. We don't want a lot of conversation here with others. We want to take you one by one. He said to the first, "How much do you owe my master?" 100 measures of oil. He said to him, "Take your bill, sit down quickly, because I'm going to be losing my job here." He doesn't say that, and write 50. So they're assuming that his offer is one that has been approved by the landowner. It has not. but they're assuming that. He said to another, and how much do you owe? He said, 100 measures of wheat. He said, take your bill and write 80. So the reductions in amounts owed will endear the renters to both the landowner and the manager. And again, they're seeing these actions as approved by the landowner. So you have to get the picture of all of these renters thinking that this is all coming through the manager from the landowner. And now the landowner is going to look really good in their eyes. In fact, they maybe want to throw a party for him because he's shown all this generosity toward them. And two examples provided show this to be a very large commercial enterprise. I did a little research on the amounts here. The numbers provided show a large commercial enterprise, total harvest of olive oil, 1,800 gallons. Total harvest of wheat, 2,000 to 3,000 bushels. This was quite a commercial enterprise that they had going. So, verse 8. The master, when he hears about all of this, probably people are coming and telling him, thank you so much. We really appreciate your generosity, Mr. Landowner. He commended the dishonest manager for his, and there's that phronesis word, his practical wisdom, his shrewdness, his best practice. He really figured out how to handle this situation. For the sons of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than the sons of light. So the landowner is trapped, but also blessed by the manager's plan. He compliments the manager, not on his dishonesty, and this is where, again, to be careful how you read this. The compliment is not on his dishonesty. Compliment is on his shrewdness. And the rascal has entered a new world for himself, a world of grace. The grace that's shown him by his master in keeping him on now. The grace of friendship that is shown by his own grace, even though the motivation wasn't very good. His own grace toward those renters. And he now has a future. All right. So that gives us the story as told by Jesus. Now let's talk a little bit about those closing verses. I tell you, make friends for yourselves by means of unrighteous wealth. All right, I'm going to retranslate that. In the Greek, you have to trust me on this, allows us to do this. I tell you, make friends for yourselves in an age of unrighteous wealth, in a time when there seems to be so much unrighteous wealth, so that when it fails, they may receive you into the eternal dwellings. Hang on to this thought. One who is faithful in a very little is also faithful in much. One who is dishonest in a very little is also dishonest in much. That's straightforward. If then you've not been faithful in the unrighteous wealth, who will entrust to you the true riches? And if you've not been faithful in that which is another's, who will give you that which is your own? No servant can serve two masters, for either you'll hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon, God and money. So as I said, these verses are actually a poem on faithfulness and wealth. Verse 9 ties closely to the story, using money to make friends. Let's go back to that, verse 9. I tell you, make friends for yourselves in a time of unrighteous wealth, so that when this unrighteous wealth fails, when that's all over with, when this Confederate money we're dealing with that only will last so long and it's going to be gone, when it's all gone, these friends of yours for whom you've spent this money will welcome you into the eternal dwellings. You'll see them in heaven, and they'll welcome you. So the child that you spent unrighteous wealth for, who's starving in Haiti, and you did the Feed My Starving Children feed here, it could be that you'll see that child in heaven, and that child will be there to welcome you in heaven. So it's the spending of it's unrighteous wealth because it's in an unrighteous age, but it's spending it for a good purpose, making friends for heaven is the way I would interpret this. Is that clear? Half of you said, yeah, it's good. The other half, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. So what I think Jesus is saying here in verse 9, 9 is the key verse, at least in this run. Make friends for yourselves, that is, make friends for eternity, using this unrighteous wealth that we all have here. Unrighteous means it's filthy lucre. It's money that is in an unrighteous age. So that when that's all gone, all this money that we have, those people that you've helped and made friends with will be there to welcome you into heaven. Some of you would be good poker players. There are other ways that this goes. Some people think that the eternal dwellings is really talking about hell. And this is an ironic statement. If you keep doing what you're doing with money in a bad way, this is where you could land. That's called the ironic interpretation of the parable. Jesus does not use irony very often. So I think where Jesus tells this story, there has to be a grace theme. And I'm saying the grace is in that landowner who was so gracious toward that conniving manager that the manager banked on the master's grace with his plan. That he would trust that this wasn't going to go down badly for him as he responded. So, yeah. All right, where does the story turn? Where is the clue to resolution? Like the prodigal son, where does it turn? The plot line. Where's the aha? Yeah, where the manager is talking to himself, just like the prodigal son talked to himself. I know what I'll do. I'll go back to my father and maybe he'll take me on as a hired servant. That's not the full resolution of the parable. That's where it turns, though. And again, it's based, like the prodigal son story, on the grace of the superior, the grace in this case of the landowner. And again, we don't really get the consequences. We're assuming everything works out well for this rascally steward, but we're not really told how the story ends. He's complimented by the landowner, but we don't get all the details of how the story plays out. All right. Not to be missed in the story, the rascal's awareness of the landowner's grace drives his plan. He would not have this plan if it weren't for the grace that he was shown by the landowner. Even though the landowner says, I'm going to need to terminate you, that's where it stops. There's no other retribution. There's a lot of grace in that statement, and he doesn't terminate him right away. That's still coming. All right, there's a place in the kingdom for wise and creative management of resources. We can't miss this. I think this is what Jesus is saying, that it seems like the sons of darkness out there do a whole better job with their planning and strategic work and visioning and so forth than we do in the church. And so I think Jesus is saying that watch what goes on in that other kingdom out there, the kingdom of the world, because sometimes we can learn from them. So I think one of the questions I have for your small groups to talk about is, what could your church learn from a really good restaurant about how to run the church and what you're going to be doing in the church? So the wisdom, the shrewdness, the best practices that we see out in the world can sometimes be a real benefit to the kingdom of Christ as well. This could be very much a how much more story. If this rascally manager solved his problem by relying on his master's mercy, how much more will God help you when you trust him? So if this turns out well for the manager, how much more as we trust God and his grace can things turn out well for us? All right. Let's look at some artwork. Dutch artist, 16th century. I took out that corner and put it over on the right so you could see it, but he's actually, it looks like the moment that this comes to him, what he's going to do. And he's going to meet with those renters and change their ledgers. See? So that it could be as his finger is raised. I think that finger, oh, I know what I'll do. He's doing this while he's talking with the landowner. It's a very clever portrayal of what shall I do? Oh, I know what I'll do. I'm going to change how much they owe in terms of their rent in kind. Quite a painting. The colors are amazing, aren't they? I love the colors of that painting. Weimer's Well, 16th century again, dishonest steward. Again, the artist is trying to give you, just like the last painting, look at the face of the steward on the left. What's he doing? He's shrewdly planning. He's thinking what he's going to do next. And the landowner is pretty much saying, you know, you can no longer, as he says, you can no longer serve as my steward. It's almost like a push away. But he's thinking and planning. Some good art there. Can't see much to this one. Italian artist Domenico Fetti. Again, pleading his case before the landowner. Probably significant is the dress that they're wearing, showing them to be very wealthy, and the obligatory dog in the left-hand corner. This etching, anonymous. That's interesting, isn't it? Look at the right hand of the steward covering his face. And I'm not sure if that's shame or what, but this is the confrontation between the two of them. This is from an old Sunday picture book for kids from the 19th century. I was just so struck by the colors that the artist chose for this. How often do you see a picture of a wealthy man in Jesus' time wearing yellow and green and purple? Yes, maybe, but the colors are amazing. And again, kind of calling him out on the accounts. Eugene Brennan, Swiss, but spent most of his time in France, did a whole series of charcoal and colored pencil drawings on the parables, all 40 parables. So you've seen his work before. If you've ever seen the painting, it's the best Easter painting ever done, in my opinion. And when Peter and John are racing to the tomb, you ever seen that? Look it up, Brennan, Peter and John. And he depicts them racing to the tomb, and it's even got some color to it. Once in a while he'd use some colored pencil. But this is, look at how sad and despondent and how stern he depicts the judge to be. I don't know, in my mind, if the judge, the landowner, is that stern. It's very well done, though. And here are a couple paintings by Mironov, a contemporary artist who paints as if he's living in the 15th, 16th, more like 17th century, I suppose. But here he's pointing out the discrepancies in the ledger to the young steward. And he did another one, Mironov, just a couple years ago, again pointing to the ledger, showing him what he's found. Aren't the colors wonderful? Okay. I just threw this in. Jesus and his disciples walking by on the right side, looking at all these wealthy people, and Gary Kim, contemporary artist, called it Wall Street. That's pretty cool. But definitely Jesus had something to say to those people on the left. He really did. He had lots to say to the rich. And this is definitely a parable for all who are doing quite well, including the renters. All right, who needs to hear this story? Those who bring no cleverness or creativity to their walk with Christ. Those who don't plan out, for instance, their witness. They don't plan on, how can I approach this friend of mine with the gospel? There's no best practice that they put into place for doing that. People who miss the power of grace to make friends for the future. That, for me, is this story. The power of grace, the landowner's grace, that empowers me to make friends for my future, knowing that it will also benefit the landowner. I hope that's coming through to you. All right. Those whose lives are singularly dedicated to financial wealth. And that's the parable of the bigger and bigger barns, the barn builder parable. If it's just about gaining wealth and not about gaining friends, then we're going to have a problem. Friends for eternity. Friends for eternity. Friends for the eternal dwelling. All right, finally, on the road with Jesus. Jesus' attitude towards sinners is compassionate and welcoming. I don't think that's the right slide, actually.
It's not. We have something different than that.
That looks like a slide from last week, maybe. All right. So what do we take from this then? Forget about that, I guess. Oh, good. Okay. Thank you. Money is a tool for making friends for eternity. That would summarize the parable for me. Money is a tool for making friends for eternity. Jesus calls us to be phrenismos, wise as serpents and innocent as doves. It's from Matthew 10. Wise as serpents. And again, he uses that word for practical wisdom. And finally, ultimately, God's grace, not the accumulation of wealth, determines our future. So that as we consider the wealth that we have, and by any standard, everybody in this room is wealthy, we understand that that's ours by grace. It's ours because the landowner has decided to grace us with that wealth. And even if we've worked hard to earn it, we still see it as a gift that we're given to steward and to manage, as opposed to something that's our reward for all our hard work. That doesn't demean the hard work. It just recognizes that there's another player in all of this. And that player is the landowner, the one who owns everything, our Lord. All right. How are we doing on time? Good. All right, so have a good conversation, and we'll see you in a few minutes for